Nicole, do you want to? Hi. Hello, everyone. Are we good?
Yes.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. I see some new faces. I see some familiar faces. My name is Sarah Danziger. I'm the education coordinator here at CPW. We are very excited. Every Thursday, we like to host these things called Meet the Artist. From 5:30 to 7:30 each week, we have different talks from artists or sometimes curators, sometimes publishers, sometimes artists and collectors, like we have tonight with Näkki and Oliver. I'm going to read from Näkki's bio. Give you a little background. Oh, the show we're in right now is actually from their collection. So if you haven't already taken a look around, be a good time between their sets. We're going to introduce Näkki, then Oliver, and then we'll do a Q&A with both of them. Näkki Goranin is a Vermont photographer and writer. Since receiving her master's degree in photography and folklore, she has pursued her interest in documentary and photo history. As a Vermont artist in residence, Goranin received an NEA grant, numerous fellowships, and participation in shows in major American and European museums. Featured in the Smithsonian Magazine, People Magazine, GEO, the New York Times, as well as PBS and the BBC. Näkki is the author of An American Photo Booth, which we have back here for sale. Most recently, her work has been shown on the RTTV channel in France and Germany, and a documentary on Gordon Lightfoot on CBC Canada. Can we all give a warm welcome to Näkki?
Hi. Is this right? Okay, I'm a little shorter. Some of you may be aware, others not. It's about the 200th anniversary of photography, very close to it. And it's also the 100-year anniversary of photo booths. Photo booths came out to the public in 1926, so we're almost there. But in 1923, the prototype had already been built. So what we're looking at the images that I have here have a lot of historical importance. Most of the photos that you're going to be looking at were taken in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. And even though we're in the digital age now, most people still love to get the authentic photo booths that were made chemically. In every older photo booth, there's a whole chemistry tank. And photos go through a rotary, a round way of having each image developed. Digital photography is more efficient and easier, but it doesn't have the soul of chemistry. It doesn't have the power of being in the booth. What I'm going to do is show you a few photographs of the older photo booths. Most of you are probably familiar, look at most people, you remember the old photo booths where you put a quarter in and you would get a strip of 4. Those booths were invented in 1950 by a company called Autophoto. Prior to that, it was a whole different sensibility. And I have some rare photos, some very early photo booths I'd like to share with you, if I can operate this. That's not mine.
Nope.
Okay, technical help, sorry.
You want to click to the right.
To the right?
Right arrow.
Okay. This is a very rare photo of an early photo booth, all hand painted. I don't know if any of these have survived. I've never seen one. I went berserk when I found this photograph, and it was postmarked 1937.
Wow.
But the sensibility of it is what you call an early photomaton, which would have been an early photo booth. As you can see from the length of the photo booth, this is a booth that would have had a person in there actually developing the photos. Not all photo booths were made mechanically. Some of them actually had a little person who was in there developing the chemicals. And I actually own a booth like that. It's called a Smile a Minute booth. And you think about these people in the summer taking all the heat, the whiff of the chemicals, in these booths. And there would be in these booths a little peephole that the operator who was in the booth would like sort of look at the people while people would not be aware that somebody was in there, and they would be getting their photos taken. And then they were very quickly developed. There was no negative. This was a photo positive paper. So each photo strip was one of a kind, or they could be cut up. But this is a remarkable piece of early photography. And you see the price, 3 photos, 10 cents. Amazing. Okay. Now this I was very excited to find this. This is an envelope that was given when people would go and get their photos, and usually the strip. Originally, photo booth strips were 8 photos in a strip, and then they were reduced to 4. And the operator of the booth would, cut them up into 4 separate photos. But what is so mind-blowing about this, for those of you that are really into photo history, it says, ask about the new full figure photos. I was like hysterical when I saw that. There are only 3 pieces of evidence that I have found in 20 years of research that acknowledge that there were photo booths where people were standing, not sitting. And some of the photos that are here that appear to be more full figured were actually done in photo booths. Not all of them. Some of them were done in studios, but some of them were actually done in a booth. And for some reason, nobody wrote about it. So to find something like this, just unbelievable. And I have a Smile a Minute photo booth, which is huge, all made out of wood. Okay, this would have been from the 1930s, when people that owned photo booths would go from town to town, and they would rent storefronts that were empty, and they would put up signs saying, coming to, especially in African-American neighborhoods, coming to town, new process, get your photo taken. And people would go, and you can see they, had the poster acknowledging, and they would get their photos done, because many small towns did not have photo booths. A photo booth would require maintenance. Photo booths would need technicians that would come, and once or twice a week would change the chemicals in the water. And so a lot of towns didn't have a support system, where they had somebody that could do that. So this is, again, a very rare picture of a traveling photo booth. Okay, again, this is another photo booth, and you can see it's very temporary. It's outside. This is from, actually, I think this photo might have been part of the WPA, but I'm not sure. I haven't been able to find that. People would go to fairs or any kind of groups that would get together, and they would set up the photo booths. And what's really interesting on this, I love, is no baby pictures on Saturday. It's so great, because they wanted to get people in and out as quick as they could. And in terms of communities of people, photo booths were so democratic. There was no prejudice, there was no segregation, there was no problem with people getting their photos. It was something that was truly for the people. And Anatole Josepho, who invented the photo booth, who was originally from Siberia, one of the things that he was very involved with socialism. He wanted to invent something that everybody would have access to, that they would be excited by. And he lived long enough, he lived until the 60s, to see his creation become something that brought so much happiness to people. I mean, you never heard a bad story about a photo booth. Okay, this is a photomatic booth, which is a photo booth, but it's very different from a photo booth strip. There would be one photo that would come, and it would have a frame around it. And for anybody that's interested in mechanics, it's an amazing process. There was no separate camera. The inside of the cabinet actually was a part of the camera. The photo booth, the photomatic picture would come down, and when you press the button, it was like a pinholes camera. The closure would open up, the image would register, then it would close, and instead of the photos going into chemical tanks, it would be sprayed. And I actually own one of these booths. And there were, in the booth inside, there are 6 or 7 rubber tubes, and each tube had a different chemical. And 2 of the tubes had water, to clean the process. And all the chemicals would be stored on top. And then the bottom was a base for, the dirty chemicals. And the photomatics, for those of you that know how to operate cameras, not digital, the paper was a slower speed film, paper. So the images would be very soft. And it's actually my favorite photo booth image. And I'm going to show you some examples of that, maybe.
You're pressing the right.
Okay, I got it. Now this is a booth that's in my book. This is such an amazing booth, Hollywood Smile. The photomaton or photo booth was in this little trailer. And the guy who owned this was a cowboy. And he would go to different rodeos, and he would take the trailer with him and do photos of people, in their home with the cowboy hat and, all this stuff. And in between, he would do rope tricks during the rodeos. And one day, a very attractive woman came in, young, and they ended up getting married. And they then went out, this is in the Southwest, they went to all the different rodeos, going from Texas all the way up to Canada, and would do pictures. And he passed away, and I was able to track down a booth to southern Illinois, and I couldn't get any more information. And I just have the feeling somewhere in some field in southern Illinois, this booth is there waiting for me, rusting out. And I would love to go look for it. Okay, now this is a photomatic, and this is one that just makes my heart melt. I just love this image so much. And you can see when I talk about the images are softer. Now, for those of us that are now, we're all in the digital age, you have a sharpness, you have precision with digital imagery, which I find very distracting because my eyes don't see perfectly like a digital camera. This is the way I see the world, especially without my glasses. And that's why, one of the reasons why I love this. And, it goes without saying the amount of feeling in these 2 images is just amazing. Okay, here's another one that I really love. I feel very strongly about. And the lighting was set up in the photomatics, so there wasn't a lot of reflection on the skin. So people that would have darker complexion, sometimes there's an issue where the lights reflect off the skin and you don't get the detailing in the skin, especially some African American people. But the photomatic was able to accommodate that with the slower speed of their paper. Okay. And again, and technically, to have people with such different tones in their faces and to accommodate such great detail in one image is amazing. This is obviously Second World War. Again, I love the Second World War. And they had a lot of these booths that would go to conventions. People wanted to make money. And this is great, Shriners Convention. Oh, I also want to mention, I'm just going to go back a second. Now, you notice the staining and everything on this? The reason why we're getting stains, it's not just that it was old or it was sepia tone. None of these photos that you see were sepia tone. This is what happens when you have a booth and there are so many people using the chemicals, and the water isn't changed. So when you're working in your dark room, like I always wash prints for an hour, but these were washed for 10 seconds. Okay? And what we're doing is we're spraying. In Photomatics, there's a spray that's going for 10 seconds. So that this image has survived this long is mind-blowing. Okay, here's I mean, I don't think there's any photographer alive, and I'm a photographer, any great photographer, whoever, that could do a photo that is as beautiful as this. This, on every level, it's just a magnificent photo. And again, now you see there's spots. Again, it's not foxing, it's just the breakdown of the chemistry. This is what you call fix, and that's what the spots are. And it's unfortunate, but it's, you know, instant photography, 10-second photography. And this is one I really love. I find that, you know, this is for me personally a very moving image. There's so much love, and there's no, you know, photographer there. People can relax, they can be themselves. If this couple, you know, had been with a photographer, I don't think she would be as relaxed. But they have the privacy. You know, they go into the booth, they pull the curtains, and it's them. Yes?
Was it a time, like, did it, like, a lot
I'm
of
a
time?
little hard to hear. So.
Was it a time process? Like, some of the photo booths, you'll see it'll count down, or it'll.
That's a digital image.
Well, so how did they know when it was going to be exposed?
Good question. You go in, you put in your quarter, and you wait. And I mean, there's no little meters going 4, 3, 2, 1. No, it's just you put it in, and you'll see a lot of photos where people are still reaching down, or somebody's like fixing their hair, or, you know, they're slapping somebody, or, you know, whatever people do, because they're, you know, they're waiting for it. And you know, you see all sorts of odd things in a lot of pictures, but it's pretty much you sit and wait. Yes?
I noticed that all of the past few, including this one, they're all set in this standardized metal frame. Are they fixed to that, which then allows them
in the factory? I actually was lucky enough to talk to the president of the Mutoscope company, which produced these, and they had a large factory space in Long Island City on Long Island. And a lot of this processing was done in the dark or with like red lights, you know, that were film sensitive. And it was very, very loud. I remember the guy telling me, he said, because the paper would go through, and they had some kind of machine that would stamp, put the photos in the frames. And then in the development of the pictures, when they'd be sprayed, and then when they put the wash on, the image would go back and forth like this, and that's one of the reasons why they had the frame, because it kept the water in for washing it.
Does it also contribute to the longevity of the photo?
It could, yeah. It's a good point. Good point. And I think the idea too was there was a little thing on the back, which I'll show you, to make it, I'll show you, there was like a little easel. So you had a picture in a frame that you could actually put down. And here's, you know, another photo. Okay, here, so this is the back of the frame, and there were all different variations of the back, and this one doesn't have the easel part, but there, depending on the time period, they would say different things in the back, and there were also advertising was done on the back. Let's see. See, here, this is when they ripped out the easel where it was, the photo was taken, and you can see another one. Okay, so this, now we're away from Photomatics. This is a picture from the 30s or 40s. This image would have been done in a more non-conventional photo booth. This, you can see the size, the format of this tells me that it was on a roll of film that was invented by a named Leo Mandel. And this is from the Mandel factory, and they produce the longer, narrow films. photo booths were a big money-making product for people. People made so much money with one photo booth that they were able to buy houses, to pay for their family. I mean, they really pulled in money, something as simple as a photo booth. I don't know if that situation still exists now, but I know a lot of people are independently have photo booths because they just make a lot of money. People really love them. Okay, I love this image. And again, this is the soft image. Now, people always say to me, these are sepia tone. No, none of these images are sepia tone. What happens over time when you get images that weren't washed long enough, you have what's a breakdown of the silver halides that give the image its blackness and its whiteness. So eventually, when you see an image like this with these colors, 20 years from now, there won't be any photo left, or it'll be almost gone, which is, really sad, but which is great, which I always tell people, if your photos are really important to you, make digital images of them, because unless they've been washed with selenium or something very carefully, an outer wash, they're not going to hold up. And this one I love. This is from Chicago. This reminds me a lot of my grandmother. It is a wonderful backdrop. Moons have been so popular in American culture and photography. You just see that over and over and over again in a lot of the images. And I grew up in Chicago, and I remember very clearly seeing women with this kind of kerchiefs on the back of their head, mostly for religious reasons. And I'm just very moved by this woman. Okay, and again, these are great shots. There were people that worked in the studios. None of these photos, earlier photos, were color. Color didn't come in until the 1970s. So they had people that worked at a lot of the studios where these photo booths were for 25 cents, they would color in the photos with water paint. Or you could send to the factory. You would send a photo with a quarter or 2 quarters, and then they would send it back to you, colored. Okay, this is 1970. This is when we first started with a color photography. And the reason why there were no color photo booths before 1970 is the process is very unstable, color. And the photo booths would heat up. You have an enclosed space, you have this dark room, and it would get very warm because you have a motor in there, and it would just heat up, and the color was not able to sustain itself. So some brilliant technician, engineer in the late 1960s, early 70s, was able to create a more stable process. It's amazing to me that this photo has stayed so well as it has, because it's 50 years old for a color photo. It's pretty amazing. And this is me. I'm also an artist. I'm a master's degree in photo art, and this is the kind of work that I do with photo booths to create a photo art. And this was done in Montreal. There's a very large photo booth company, Autophoto of Canada, in Montreal, and they had the last of the color photo booths. Color photo booths chemically no longer exist. Nobody makes the chemistry for them anymore, unfortunately, because the color, the tones are just really exciting. When I look at this, I really love it. It's time for me to go. We're going to now hear from our other resident. I'm a collector. Oliver's a collector. We're both obsessive collectors, and he's going to tell you all about photo booths from a whole different perspective. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's kind of great listening to Näkki, because we do share this obsessive interest in not just in vernacular photography, found photography, but a particular kind of vernacular photography, photo booths and our arcade pictures. But what's interesting when I listen to Näkki is we have arrived at the same place, and in some ways come from the same place, and that we're both photographers, but also like from really different worlds. And I want to talk a little bit about my, I don't have very many pictures, but talk a little bit about sort of how I came to collecting pictures, which is something I've been doing for much less long than Näkki has. Now I have a much less extensive sort of history of the medium itself. But a good place to start maybe is, Näkki was talking about darkrooms. So I'm a photographer. I've been showing for many, many years. I hate darkrooms. I've never been in a dark room except to have to teach it. I love digital photography completely. And yet here we are arriving at the same spot. So I just want to, these are 6 photographs of mine from the last 1983. So I guess, what is that, 40 years ago? My God, that's 40 years ago. So over the period from different series. But one thing that you'll notice in all of these pictures is that there's no people in them. So I went over 35 years without photographing people. I didn't really have any much interest in photographing people, and which is kind of interesting that I've ended up collecting kind of obsessively pictures of people. But as I look back sort of retroactively at my interest in photography, everything that interests me about photo booth and arcade photography is in these pictures. And, I won't go into, I'm not talking about my own work, so I won't go into detail how they're made, but most of them, some of them are made in Photoshop, some aren't made in Photoshop, but the one thing that is sort of constant through all of them is there's not like a moment of looking through a camera and a decisive moment of capturing a sort of decisive moment. A lot of these are made up of pictures that I have taken that have been seamlessly collaged together, but I have a real sort of interest in, I guess, historically, what would be sort of the tradition of pictorialism of photography that is not taken as much as it is made. And I sort of came up in the art world at a time in the early 80s when there's postmodern ideas about photography. A lot of people were questioning the veracity and the truthfulness of photographs. And so for me, and I've mellowed on this a lot, but a lot of the sort of foundations when I made my work were in this idea of rejecting the traditions of photography, of that, cameras could capture the essence and the soul of a person, that the decisive moment is when the art was made. I was really more interested in the kind of painterly qualities of photography, which is another thing that I think this has in common with photo booths, is this idea of combining painting and photography. You'll notice with a lot of these pictures, they're either painted on or they're shot behind these, magnificent, in front of these magnificent backdrops, which were painted. So there's a kind of synthesis of painting and photography and creating a kind of illusion in these pictures, which is kind of a postmodern sort of aesthetic, this idea of creating fictions out of this supposedly very real thing. There's also, I think, in a lot of this work, a real populist and sort of democratic tendency. And I was really interested in making images that were sort of very appealing, that would be sort of accessible to anyone. And they're also, and this is maybe the most important thing that really interests me about this found photo booth photography, is it's authorless. They go into the photo booth and there's nobody there taking the picture. The subject is the artist in many ways, right? And I think that I use a lot of found photography in this work, and I like the idea of even though I am the author of these pieces, they're made from fragments of found images and other people's work, and that there isn't sort of a that decisive moment of photography is very often about calling attention to the photographer's ability to capture it. Whereas here, these are sort of made over time, either on a computer or not. Yeah.
Can you tell us what we're looking at?
Sorry. Well,
Like
that's
on the upper right.
so. This is part of Also-
a waterfall and
Right.
a movie theater, outdoor.
So these aren't great, they're sort of blown out up here and it's hard to see, but all of these are made from fragments of pictures I've taken or found. And
Got that.
And they're either, so literally what you're looking at here is, this is a photograph I took of a huge billboard at Universal Studios that they would shoot movies in front of. So it's a huge painting of a billboard.
Yeah.
This is a Thomas Cole painting, a fragment of it from a few miles away from here, Catterskill Falls. And this is a photograph I took in Hawaii. And the sky is, I don't know. So they've been, in this case, digitally put together.
This is a series, we're looking at 6 that are part of
No.
the series.
You're looking at 6 that span 30 years. So this is from the 80s, this is the early 80s, it's not digital. These are photographs that, I just put these up here to give you a sense of I'm not talking about my work necessarily, just to sort of get an idea of where I'm coming from. So each of these is from a different body of work,
Oh, okay,
right?
different eras, different body of work.
1980s, late 80s, early 90s, mid 90s, and up. And this is like an interior that doesn't exist in a real place. Yeah, they're all
And what size are they?
a lot of, who has that? Hi, a lot of different sizes. I print, even the prints themselves exist in different sizes. I've never really liked the idea necessarily of limiting myself to one size. So this one exists both very large and very small at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah, that's like an interpretation of this file. If you could, then I'll help you. But it's good, like she said, besides it, she enjoys it, and the same thing, you take a picture, and it provides her to remember. Like, it's a beautiful thing to enjoy, but
Yeah, I mean,
everybody interprets, that's what makes the world go round, That's what it's for, right?
so yeah, I'm sorry if I'm really not sort of going into this work just because I was trying to use it as a bridge just to sort of, this would seem to be really different from this, but a lot of the sort of qualities in this are evident, and I'll sort of segue, I'll come back to that, I guess. But at some point when the internet came along, I started to realize that there was this huge archive of analog pictures that were being uploaded to the internet by people who had these kind of crazy pictures. And I started downloading these pictures, and I created huge folders, just thousands and thousands of pictures. And like a lot of artists at the time, I started playing with like typologies, like locating different, like I noticed that I have literally 1,000 pictures of divers and people jumping, right? And these I actually physically collect the prints of, but a lot of these I would just go online. I didn't own the prints. I would download the pictures and put them in the folders. So here you've got 3 gangs or groups of photographs of photographers. Here you've got photographs of divers and jumpers. And I've got about 100 different folders on my computer that have these different groups. And I don't know if any of you know Peter Cohen, the collector. He collects vernacular photographs. He's really generous, sort of great guy. Anyway, I went to his loft a while back, and he's got just box after box after box. I mean, he literally has just tens of thousands of photographs. And the names of all of his boxes were exactly the same as the names that I have on all my folders in my computers, which was interesting. I mean, there's all the stuff you would expect, like birthdays and Christmas trees, but there's, like women with guns or, Blur and things like that. It's just, you start to notice when you go through this massive archive of images out there, that there starts to be these kind of movements. So I did an exhibition. I've done a few exhibitions where I would create these groupings, very small prints. These are not prints I own. These ones actually were from prints I own. A lot of these were just sort of downloaded off the internet, and I would try to find out whose they were, but obviously that's very difficult to do. And then, you would walk in and there'd be like 600 pictures on the wall. And if you notice over here, there's like a video. I was really interested in the way these images worked within a social media context, and the way, there was this like archive of images that people, could talk about and did talk about. So I would upload, like this is a series of thousands and thousands of pictures of people standing by televisions. And it's amazing, like, we all know, you grew up, the television was kind of in the center of the house, and then the person would go and would stand next to the TV. And when you start to see just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these, you start to get a sense of like, oh, this is like a kind of almost like a ritual or something. So I would sometimes post, hundreds of these back when I'm not on Facebook anymore, but I was at the time. So I would post a picture and then people would, long threads of people commenting on it. And I was really sort of enjoyed the social aspect of that. And at some point I befriended somebody online and I'd never met him before. His name was John Monteith. And he was really funny and I really liked him. And he had this huge collection he would collect from the internet pictures from early, like 2000, 2001 chat room photographs that people would, post of themselves, like in front of the camera. When we had little cameras mounted on top of the computer. And he had this huge collection of those. And I had this digital collection of all of these pictures. And we started, every day we would send each other a picture. And then we would send each other one back that we found from our collection that matched it in some way. And we have thousands of these. And it's just amazing to me. We never had probably, this is from, I don't know when, the 20s or something, or 30s. And this is a picture from 2001 of somebody. And they're basically, sort of doing whatever the woman would have done in her living room in 2001. And that's like a picture of a woman with her gun. And it was just, again, it was like for me, the social, the way these kind of generated conversation, in this case, a friendship between us. So we did a book of these images. But, I'm talking about sort of a lot of these being downloaded off the internet and worked with that way. At some point, I started collecting pictures, in particular, these kind of pictures, where I really became interested in this idea of the painted backdrop. I love the line that goes through here, which to me is just, they don't try to hide the artifice, they almost celebrate the artifice of it, which I really love. There's something so sort of sweet and beautiful about, about the setup of it. And as I said, it kind of jives with my general interest in fabricated, staged, artificial photography, as opposed to street photography and things which I love, but just weren't my interest. So I was collecting these, and then I decided for the first time in my life, I want to start taking pictures of people. It seems crazy, I collect all these pictures, and I don't take them. So these are pictures that I took. I put these next to these, but I didn't make these with these pictures in mind. I just thought they went well together, so it was interesting. But so these are pictures from a very large series I did of portraits maybe 10 years ago of friends and family members that are in front of these backdrops, which are obviously very similar to what we're seeing here. One of the differences, however, is that this picture of my wife and one of our goats is shot in front of a green screen. And the background is digitally dropped in. And what's interesting is that this kind of photography is alive and well. And if you have kids, when they go to school to get their class photos taken that day, they come home with a pamphlet and they pick the backdrop that they're going to use. And then when they go to school, they sit in front of a green screen and they digitally drop in the backdrop and they look, one can argue about the soul of digital versus the softness of film and all of that, and I get that argument, but it's basically the same thing. You're basically taking somebody and putting them Mona Lisa style in front of a Sfumato background, a kind of soft background, and taking, and dropping an artificial background in. So I think that the digital realm really, continues that. And then I just want to end on this picture. Because, we're talking about the sort of warmth and power and beauty. So this is a photograph of someone who doesn't exist, but I made it in AI, which I'm not interested in doing. I use AI a lot, but I'm not interested in doing this with AI. I just did it for this purpose, to sort of give you an idea that in some ways for me anyway, it comes full. I mean, it definitely, when I agree with Näkki, when I look at those pictures Näkki was showing, yes, I'm just like, oh my God, it's so beautiful. And you feel the warmth of it. Yeah.
Can you please explain how you do a picture with AI? What is the process?
So, contrary to what people say, it's not just typing in black man in a hat, whatever. It's not just typing that in. But it is, I enter text and I'll say something like, black man wearing a hat with film grain, photo booth style, whatever, blah, blah, blah. I'll get 4 pictures back. I will then choose one that looks best to me, modify what I've put in, and then feed that back into there. So it's a long process until you get it. Yeah.
So what does artificial intelligence have to do with it? It's a choose and search project.
No, because it's making this picture.
Well, where did the 4 pictures come from?
Where do the what?
The 4 that you have to choose from. The 4
They are manufactured by the artificial intelligence.
Based off of other
Based, not even. It's not even based off of other images. That's a lot of people think that it's actually using images. It's not using pictures. It's learning to see. It knows what a hat looks like. It knows what skin looks like. It knows. I mean, it's learning to see. Yeah.
I think that 1, 2, 3, that's good. I have kids who had 2 or 3. They say bring us a picture, then a picture, and a good picture, but I know a lot of them. The only one I like, but I realized it looked like when I was treating maturity, when I do accept it, or you see some of the people, they'll say, I'm here, Joe, like Victoria's Secret, Joe drew a flat top. Right? Handsome man. But
this person doesn't exist. He's not based on specific photographs that exist. It is, now listen, I used AI in this case to make something that looks like an analog photograph. I could have told it to make me a romantic landscape painting. I could have told it to make me a picture of a green man with a pizza on his head. Whatever, yeah.
But how do you make the elements of the person?
I don't. It does.
Who's it? I mean, is it a website? Is it a website?
First of all, you're asking me questions I can't actually answer, but I
It's a
can.
website, right? That would go-
No, it's not a website.
Well,
It's a program called, in this case, Midjourney.
Oh, it's a program, okay.
Yeah, I mean, but there's many of them. It's the future. I mean, it is. I don't know if you've used any text AI, but it is incredibly powerful and getting more powerful for the day. And I don't want to get lost in this because it's a huge conversation and stuff. And I don't. Yeah.
If it's artificial, how can it be powerful?
Okay, if it's artificial, how can it be powerful?
Yeah.
Well, the people said the same thing about photographs. I mean, the most famous art critic of the time, Baudelaire, said that about photographs. He said, "This is crap. This is soulless. It's made by a machine."
No.
He doesn't want to talk about it. He doesn't want to talk about it.
No, I don't mind talking about that. I mean, the issue of soullessness. All new technologies are met by resistance. Photography was considered machine-made and disregarded, not considered an art form. But anyway, I'm not championing this. I'm just pointing out that for better or worse, this is where. Let's not.
So are you now the author of this picture?
Sure. Why wouldn't I be? It wouldn't exist if I hadn't made it.
Take it.
What?
No, but he made
Well, I'm not calling it a photograph.
But he made it.
I'm not calling it a photograph.
I don't know if he made it because he says himself, it made it.
Yeah, but he used.
Well, it depends what you mean by made. It would not exist if I had not.
He used a tool.
I used it too.
Instead of using a camera. he
Yeah,
used-
well, so
he
it's
used a
okay.
computer.
It's
Yeah.
what?
He used a computer that learned photographs. It's a totally different.
And I just happen to choose photograph here. Listen, I have a lot of students who are 20 years old. They love the stuff. It's here. It doesn't matter what we think. Technology doesn't care what we think. Huh? What?
I just want to interject that in fact, right now, there are a lot of copyright and issues that are swirling around what is raising these questions.
Of course. But there was around music too.
Yeah, no, I'm just.
People raise copyright issues while they figure out how to monetize it.
Was the music created by a man, not gender specific, or by a machine?
What music?
The one you just cited.
Oh, most music right now is made by machines. Most music right now is made by machines. Most popular music is made by machines. Electric guitars, I mean, are machines, if you want to think about it that way. People unplugged Dylan. They thought, oh, this is horrible. You're ruining the world with your electric music.
That's a very good
Listen, I play devil's advocate somewhat, but it doesn't matter what we think. It's here. Doesn't matter what we think. Let's get back to
Yes, I don't mind that it's here, but I do mind the words that try to explain it.
well, okay, so I always tell people if the word photography bothers you, don't call it a photograph. I don't call them photographs.
Cameras take pictures.
It's just a work of art. It's a visual work of art that we look at, and we look at it and we go, it's beautiful.
Camera is beautiful.
However, can I ask you, the photograph that you had of a man with a backdrop, an older man with a long
Yeah.
beard and the painterly backdrop?
Yeah.
Was that a photograph you made? Was there a man sitting in front of a backdrop?
That was my brother, yes.
Of your father?
Brother.
Brother,
Brother.
really?
He's very handsome.
Well, that's really an extraordinary photograph.
Thank you.
Because the man is so incongruous with the background.
Yeah.
The reality of that man is very striking.
Well,
It's very poignant, actually.
I think a lot of that idea of incongruity is a lot of these photo booth pictures too. You'll see, these like beautiful like 19th century romantic landscape backgrounds and stuff with people holding guns or something. There's a weird disconnect there. I think that often has to be kind of nice.
I think it captures something about your brother that maybe you didn't.
No, to be honest, that picture was the first one I took, and it was, I was making a conscious effort to discard a lot of the cynicism that I've always had in my work, and to try to make something very real about somebody who was a very important, sort of, somewhat tragic figure in my life. So I think that, I do think that's conscious, and I'm glad that you saw that. Because I'm actually, I think my only
It's a stirring picture.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I want to ask you guys something. If you want to come up here so you can answer questions. So this is a show called Black Photo Booth. There's no black folks in the crowd here.
Bruce.
And, all right.
I've done Paul Black.
And we haven't really talked about it yet. But I'm kind of would like to. I wonder if anybody has any questions about that. I think Brian talks a little bit in the, yeah.
Yeah, I have a few questions I'll ask in a minute now
Okay.
about obscuring artifice.
Okay.
Which you brought up also, and the distinction that you made between making a photograph and taking a photograph.
Yeah.
But on the note of black photo booths,
Mhm.
why was there this democracy in who was allowed or who the patrons were in these photo booths, which I think you brought up in one of the pictures of the booths themselves. And you said, they come to town and everybody was welcome, and that seems incongruent with America.
I was the one who brought that up. Photography, since the beginning of photography, has actually been pretty democratic. There are daguerreotypes of people in America of every race. Then you have tintypes, every race. But there has never been a situation where people felt comfortable, regardless whether they were handicapped, racially, what their background was, whatever, because the photo booths didn't have anybody there saying, you can come in, you can't. It was people would walk in, they would pull the curtain, and whatever they chose to have photographed, they could have in total privacy. Most photo booths were in public places, train stations, bus stations, Woolworths, fairs, where there were people of every background had an opportunity, and they were pretty cheap. I'm sure there were photo studios in different places in this country that discriminated. I know American Indians experienced a lot of discrimination in a lot of places. But then you had Curtis, you had all these other extraordinary people that did portraits. But the Black photo booths, it's a part of American history. It's a part of who we are. It's a part of our culture. And neither of us collect just Black images. These images are part of a larger collection that we have of all different kinds of people. What's really interesting to me, I've been collecting since college, is the scarcity of images that you see of people of Asian Pacific Rim backgrounds. You don't see many photos of people from the Pacific Rim. And I've discussed this with people that are Asian, and it's really interesting. The families don't give up their photos. They love the photos, their ancestors, their family, and they're kept and they're treasured. Whereas every photo that you're looking here at one time belonged to someone, at one time was treasured, at one time was part of the family. And yet, for some reason, they ended up in a flea market. Many of the photos that I have were recovered from garbage cans. I have no pride. There isn't a garbage can in this country that I won't jump into. Yes?
Do you have a theory behind that mass dispossession?
I'm sorry, what did you say?
He's asking if there's a theory behind the mass dispossession of why people throw away their photographs.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
I have two theories. Right. I think that you don't recognize I've done it myself. I just inherited a bunch of photographs from my father, and it's just too many of them. And I don't know half of these people. And I just, I don't value them. What?
What's wrong with you?
Well, I have to say, my father was born in 1909, and I have about 5 photographs of him prior to 1940, right? I have 5 photographs of the first 5 minutes of my child's life. I have 500 photographs of every year of my childhood. I have so many photographs now, right?
Yeah.
So, it does sort of seem strange, I guess, that with there being so few of them, people throw them away, but I don't know.
I get that voyeurism as well, of like collecting all the diapers, but not perhaps.
You say voyeurism?
I did.
Okay, define that a little more as for collectors. You think we're being voyeuristic?
I'm celebrating.
Yeah, I think voyeurism.
Well,
Yes.
speaking of voyeuristic.
Yeah.
So in the, I have thousands of photo booths, but I've never come across one photo booth of a topless person. You get lots of kissing, but never topless. And it's the first
That's
selfie
interesting.
Do you have?
Oh, I have a photo booth picture, which I didn't chose not to put in my book, of two people in Chicago at a club at 1 o'clock in the morning, having sex in a photo booth. And for a whole bunch of reasons I chose, but in my book, there's a friend of mine who she has her top off and she's,
Yeah, but that's more recent.
what?
That's more recent.
Yes. I have one in there in the 50s of a black lady stripping where she's, I don't know if you remember, there are 2 or 3 strips where she's taking off the top. And I think I had the conversation in the Second World War, the American government used to have meetings for girlfriends and wives of people who were in the service. And this is a fact, they used to ask the women to send naughty photos of themselves to their boyfriends or their husbands to keep that love for America going, to keep them excited about, coming back. And I had bought a jacket for a friend of mine, a bomber jacket, Second World War, an estate sale. And I was so excited because I was going to give it to this really good friend. And I was going through it, and there was like a zippered compartment in the pocket. And I pulled the zipper open, and there was a photo of a lady, very pretty lady, with just her underpants on, nothing else. And you could see the picture was very well worn. I mean, this had been a picture that had been looked at a lot. And when I gave it to this guy, I kept the picture in there because they should stay together till as long as they exist. But it's very touching because, the meaning of images. I think people that did do stripping in photo booths were not doing it for anything but the pure joy. And there was actually an article that was written that I found about how Woolworths, they had to start taking the curtains off a lot of the photo booths because people were being very naughty in the photo booths.
But I really think that intimacy, we've all had that feeling of being in a photo booth and you pull that curtain and there is a kind of, you're going to create something. It's removing the photographer from the equation, I think, really does change things. And I think, over time, and Näkki probably knows this better than I do, I just noticed it looking at a lot of pictures, over time, you get a lot more playfulness, as time goes on. But in the early, I think there was still this feeling of like, this is our opportunity to create a formal portrait. And that's the sort of the democratic thing about it, is obviously before photography, only wealthy people could have portraits done of themselves. And I think that, that is one of the appeals of photographs of Black people in photo booths is they do speak to that kind of accessibility and the dignity of being photographed and stuff. But there's something troubling for me, which I just want to mention as somebody who collects these things. I came to collecting later than Näkki, when I think that the death of analog photography, or the closure of it as the dominant form, really amped up the fetishizing and the collecting of it, and there's a recognition of it being a closed set now. And so I think the prices, and then eBay, everything meets its price on eBay. In the days of going to flea markets, it's harder now because you put it on eBay. And anyway, photos of Black folks sell for a lot more than photographs of white folks. And that has always really interested me. And I have a couple of theories on what that's about. And I think one of them is that there's just a beauty to the sort of the speak to that democratic thing. But the other thing is I think there is a kind of maybe not entirely healthy romanticizing of the other also that goes on. And I can't articulate it, and I certainly can't prove it, but there's something about it that rubs me kind of the wrong way too. I'm involved in it, I'm complicit in it, but it seems problematic.
I also think there's a political issue going on because for a whole variety of reasons we're all very familiar with, African American people have not had their voices heard. They haven't been seen. And we're now living in a time where people are catching up with equality, at least as far as the African American community goes. And the pictures are popular, especially among African Americans, but everybody wants to sort of make up for what had happened in the past. And when I used to buy African American photos, I would get like whole albums for $10. I was telling Brian, nobody would be bidding against me. I couldn't believe it. All these profoundly moving images.
And maybe, Stacy, do you, people pay more for photographs that you sell of African Americans?
The good ones, but I have plenty of like just blah, black snapshots
Right.
that, I've had for 20 years.
So do you, I mean, certainly on eBay, one can see the.
eBay photo booths of black people, definitely more. Good albums, definitely more, especially as a team. There was one on eBay last week, and I don't look on eBay that often, but it was a black family that were Jehovah's Witnesses. And I'm bidding, and like, I'm at 350 on the high bidder, and it sold for $2,300.
Oh.
What was it? A black
Black family that were Jehovah's Witnesses.
The whole album or one?
It was a whole album.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, you didn't win.
It was last week.
You didn't.
I didn't win, no. But I have these black photo albums of a gay guy that I sold privately for $5,000.
Well, that I understand, because there's the kind of inherent hidden
Yeah.
secrets in this. Gosh,
I was just gonna say, but mathematically, if a, population, marginalized population in particular, are, 15% of the whole, then it seems that there would be fewer of those photos, obviously, right? Because you're gonna have a large portion of the population that is not Black or Hispanic, and there would be more photos of those.
On eBay, I'm buying, I would say 50% of the photo booth pictures on eBay are of black people, and they sell for a lot more.
But isn't that because they're more valuable, let's just say?
They're also coming from all over the world, Yeah, right? there's
It's not like the demographic of the US,
Yeah.
it's like worldwide.
Most of them, yes, and there's great Russian photographs, but they're not of black people.
Yeah, we both collect Russian photos, so that's why.
I think there's also definitely a factor that for a long time, a lot of period media and the depictions of the past were very whitewashed, and whenever they showed people of color, they were usually suffering a lot. So there's really something special about, seeing them in such blissful and goofy states.
Yeah, definitely.
Another thing though that I've noticed is black photo albums are 90% of the time they are in terrible condition. And I'm like, why? What, like, I don't understand why so many are in terrible condition.
But Stacy, you have to remember too that most photo albums have been destroyed. I mean, the ones that you're looking at are the ones that survive. The majority of photos that we see now, historical photos, are just a very tiny part of the photo history of this country.
The Caucasian albums are generally in very good condition.
But they're few and far between. I mean, it's at least been my experience. Yeah.
And like people, to keep a photo album through generations requires like a continuous home and.
And a non-diasporic population is constantly suffering.
I have to go to ones that gave away the best one.
It seems to me that whenever you see photographs of people, we're looking at something about the human condition, something about the socio-cultural, historical time. There's something more in the picture. I mean, you can look at these and they're very interesting to look at because of the tonality, because of the hairstyle, the shower bed. But I'm really a little surprised at how tame the pictures are, how we're not really looking at a little more of a little, maybe because it's only head and shoulders, and we're seeing hairstyle and clothing, but they're very dignified. Everything's very dignified, and looks maybe 20s, 30s, 40s era. So people are dressed up in a different way than you would expect. I just like you were talking about the nude, you had some, or having, why weren't those pictures part of the show?
Most of the ones I have are not African American. We were
Oh.
focusing on the shows being African American.
I see, they weren't.
And the photos that were chosen from my book, those particular ones were not chosen. I don't think that the fact there aren't any nudes or partially nudes is a reflection on anything. It's just by chance that they're not in the show. And you talk about looking at the photos. For me, when I look at these photos, I picked photos from my collection that have a strong emotional response. For me, photography and art is all about looking at things where I transcend, where I'm very moved, where I almost leave my body. I have a very personal reaction to all the photos in my collection. Like Stacy says, she has a lot of photos of African Americans that are not strong images and they don't sell, even though there's a huge popularity. It's it's just something everybody has. People respond to different things. It's fine art, in like paintings and museums. There's some paintings that we look at and you just leave Earth. You're so moved. And same thing with photos.
Also, like when you're talking about that kind of goofiness or unrelaxing or something, we're very used to that now in the digital age when the picture is for you is take another one. And I think with Instamatics and with the sort of sensibility in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, there was if you look at these pictures of Näkki's that are more recent photos, they are playing around and having fun. But I think with some of these photographs of the 30s, they got dressed up and we went to the photo studio, the photo booth. It was a dignified moment to spend the money and take the picture.
To a technical question, but I think it also maybe informs the way that people carry themselves or the way they're emoting. What is the shutter speed?
He wants to know sort of with these older pictures, was the shutter speed in the film fast enough that or did they have to hold still?
In the photo booth, it's like a camera lens. Whoever the operator of the booth was, he could accommodate the f-stops. On the autophoto photos, which started in 1950, you had an f-stop range from f 2.4 to about f8, so you could manipulate it. The smaller the diaphragm, obviously, the sharper the image would be. But there were always accommodations made by individual people. And as sometimes the chemicals would expire, become older, they would open the diaphragm up a little more so that you get, more usage of the chemicals. With the photomatic paper, the exposure was a little bit longer because you had an ASA of the film that was slower than the ASA, which is the speed of the paper of the film on the photo booth. And there were different companies making photo paper, so you didn't always know truly what the ASA was going to be when you had different companies. I mean, there's so many different countries and so many different companies that were producing photo paper, and in Europe, you had quite a few people. And until recently, a photo booth paper was made in Russia, in St. Petersburg. But right now, with the politics, they're not able to export the photo paper to America anymore.
I think one of the important questions he was asking about shutter speed, how fast the exposure was made, is whether or not there was a flash or it was a.
They all had flash.
So that, in a sense, is a bit of an answer to his question.
Yeah, good point.
Because depending on the type of flash, it would give you an instant. And if it was a strobe versus they had the flash bulb.
Yeah, but these were not done with a strobe.
They would be doing the flash bulb then.
No, they were regular electric tungsten lights that would be turned on and turned off. But with the different booths, great question. With the different booths, you had some booths that had 2 lights, some that had 3, sometimes they had 4. Again, different companies. And there were people that made their own booths. I mean, it's amazing. It was a real cottage industry in this company. And when I was doing research on my book, I found at least 12 different companies that were making photo booths. It's amazing.
Well, that's a really interesting technical, I mean, photography is always about technical at one, stage. And if they're not flash bulbs, if they're not strobes, if they're this sort of electric process.
I'm talking pre-1970.
Well, absolutely,
Yeah.
but that would define how that picture was made, whether it was a 30th of a second, whether it was a 100th of a second. And how long, and often in those kinds of flash, there was a point at which it would warm up to its highest peak, and then it would warm down.
Right.
I should also point out that a lot of what you're looking at, particularly over here, aren't photo booths, and they're probably not standing photo booths. They're arcade photographs or studio photographs. And in that case, there was a photographer there, and some of them, I mean, the lighting is just, it's amazing. It's like they really got it down. These people knew what they were doing.
Photomatics. I have a few photomatics that come in the envelopes from
The
Photomatic.
mailing.
So were they not printed right there at the machine, or some of them were?
There was like a little machine that was attached to some of the photomatics, and it said, send your lover a picture, whatever, and you would buy it for 15 cents, I think, and you would take the picture, and then you would buy the mailing package right there. And this was made by Mutascope. Mutascope also made, they used to have booths where you could get a record made. We're talking about the 30s and 40s and 50s. And they had the same mailer, so somebody could go, get their picture taken, then go to the next booth right next to it, and then record a message. I actually have one that a boyfriend made for my mother.
I want to just quickly show a contemporary version, if you'll allow, of what.
Good question.
I was in Cambridge, Massachusetts recently, and saw this place opened in Cambridge called Go Pixel Yourself. And you go in, and there's many, many different rooms in this place. And each room is a theme room. Basically a big one of these sort of photo, I don't want to play these stupid movies, but I guess. So you've got you could pose yourself in front of, like you're on an airplane. Or you could be on the red carpet.
Oh, I have to make a trip.
Right? But what's interesting is it's obviously completely digital. It's about a narcissistic selfie culture. It's about digital, et cetera, et cetera. But on some level, I think there's a straight line from this to this, where it's about an experience of going in, having a backdrop. Yeah.
I just wanted to do, how many people in the room took a photograph of themselves in a photo booth? I'm just curious. Yeah, so.
Maybe everybody who has it.
Most of the staff.
You want to, many.
And I also wanted to ask Näkki in particular, have you ever had somebody who said, oh, that's my grandma? Or,
Yeah. When my book came out, my editor, Norton said to me, let's pray nobody calls up and wants to sue you. It's your picture. So in the beginning of the book, in the foreword, I thanked everybody. I said, there's no way I could, find the name. There wasn't any way. So I said, I want to thank you in advance for letting me use the photo. And I wish you well, blah, blah, blah. And then we got 3 phone calls, or I got 3 texts from people, but none of the people were hostile. And my editor said, send them a book immediately and cross our fingers.
I post a picture on Instagram every day for my collection. And a few times people have sent me direct messages on Instagram saying, oh my God, that's my so-and-so, my relative. And I like to on the back sometimes will have the names of people. And I like to sometimes, if it's an unusual enough name, I'll go online. Usually I find an obituary, but if the obituary often has the family's name, and a couple of times I've reconnected pictures, I send them pictures. Somebody's husband, there's a picture of their husband from World War II, and he had died 3 weeks before I contacted her with this picture, and I sent her the pictures.
How can anyone be mad about that?
What's that?
How can anyone be mad about the
Well, there's
discovery?
plenty
of,
of
like,
bad people.
Really?
Believe it.
It happens, I don't want to say it happens all the time, but in 25 years of me selling vintage photographs, it's probably happened 25 times.
And they just like, how dare you find something?
This
and
is my
resell it?
grandfather, how did you get it? And I'm like, I got it at an estate sale. So that was my cousin. It's what they, you know, like people could be really awful.
Well, if they're finding.
What do you do when artificial intelligence inquires about origin?
When the artificial intelligence contacts me and wants to know why I stole their picture, I will, I am not afraid of artificial intelligence. I feel very strongly that it is just us. It's an extension of our brains.
I think it's pretty lovely that the photo booths kind of reflect the genesis of photography to some extent. And then also the idea of like the very formal portrait was at a time where no one had cameras, you know, very few people anyway. So that was a way to get a photo. But now then you get to the point in the 60s, 70s where we all had, you know, whatever kind of camera. Polaroids, Instagram, whatever. And so we didn't need to use the photo booth to get a formal photo or any photo. We could just get our own. But the photo booth, I just remember going into the mall, you know, with my boyfriend, screwing around in there. Just not literally, just
I
but, you know,
remember the photo
you know, getting photos to put up on the refrigerator. Like it became something else, but it's still like
Aesthetic was
the
outside.
concept of it was so lovely in the fact that there was no photographer, it was private. You know, that remains simple.
Somebody said the word selfie before, and I would say these are the closest thing to selfie.
This is the first selfie.
Yeah.
That's how I.
Because you're in control of your
Right.
image
That's
for the
true.
most part.
I remember walking into a telephone booth and a black dog was in there, I was with my dad to a job with him this night, and it was snowing, and my mother was, and then I accepted it, and I'm all outside, walking out somewhere, hearing a story about my grandfather, somebody I know that happy to that, and then the photo booth wasn't there to see it, right? My friend came and looked up, and I was included in the newspaper, so that's cool, right? I was just about to lose, that's how real it is. Gotta rejuvenate, gotta stay strong, I ain't giving up. I know what I know. I know the truth, and that's a beautiful thing that we get both society. Like you try to say these people that are good people and all the time, and let life go on, while other people try to win out whatever's happening.
You know, in reference to, hello?
You don't need that.
Yeah.
Okay, in reference, you know, to what you were saying, you know, all the photos we do with phones now,
Yeah.
very few of those are gonna survive. Because, I mean, who's gonna go for that? I have like 1,300 pictures.
I have 33,900 on here because I posted them.
Are you gonna get them all printed?
I don't know. I'm gonna get them all printed.
Well-
But the
I'm
thing
like,
is,
what do I do with them? Because I want to get them.
but that's what I'm just saying. And some things are very precious, but, you know, they're just not gonna survive.
Like
Whereas the wonderful analog photos will survive much longer.
These are all prints from, these aren't the original prints, right? that we're looking at.
Yeah.
And for me, I think this is where Näkki and I, I'm sure, differ quite a bit. When I buy these pictures, and I get them in the mail in an envelope, and I open them up, and first I put them on a scanner, and I scan them, and that for me is when they become alive. And I touch them up, I crop them, I adjust them, and then they become like this digital file, which is beautiful. I'm actually not that interested in the original print of the thing. And I recognize that file because it's an original and it is the thing. But I'm like, I think that these little, sometimes I see a little picture and I'll scan it and then I'll look at it on the screen and I'll fix it. It suddenly just comes alive.
But and this is where I get very woo-woo, because when I hold the picture, I can like feel the energy. when I see where the picture's been touched a lot, where there's changes in emotion, I see thumbprints, I go, you know, this person's looked at this photo a lot. It's seeing the tears, seeing whatever the time has gone through the image. It tells me about the journey, and I find that very meaningful. It's somehow I'm touching someone from the past. I'm super sentimental, so these images really work for me because I just get such a sense of that they were loved by someone. You know, they were taken care of, they were treasured. Okay, just a non-woo-woo.
No, I just want to comment on something you said. You said, all these pictures are not going to exist. But it made me immediately think of what he does with his pictures,
Yeah.
which is he puts them on Instagram. So what's going to happen is that Instagram will own all of these pictures, and the people won't.
I know, I don't put my photos, I could.
I'm just saying, but that's what the masses do.
Yeah.
But one of the things I've noticed is that as somebody who, quote, collected for many years digital files that are uploaded, I got a lot of angry people who were angry at me because I was posting pictures.
That's how our friendship started.
That they collected, and I have definitely mellowed on that. And I sort of, my first reaction was, well, don't put it on the internet if you don't want me to use it, and you didn't take the picture, you don't own it. Well, I've definitely mellowed in that regard, and I recognize that there are different people that have a different approach to it. But I do think that, I very much know that, but I do think that there is a beauty to sharing the pictures. On my Instagram, I put at the top, I say, you know, please use these pictures for anything you want, with or without credit, I don't care. And I have literally over 500 works of art that people have made from photographs that I post, that I then, you know, download the pictures. So people are making art out of these pictures. And the good ones, let's say good ones, get passed around a lot. And theoretically, one would assume, this is sort of how the internet economy works, that picture, the original faded woo, and I agree with you, there is a beauty to that original, the aura of the original, that thing will grow in value. So spreading the digital version of it will only make that original print more valuable.
You know, and he is right on that, but at the same time, we both do books, but I do historical books, and I would rather have the photos come out for the first time in my book because they're valued in the context of a text that I write with the book, so they're seen initially the way I would like them to be seen, you know, with my background, my take. And when you put pictures online, and it's very generous what you do, it's really, it's wonderful. There's no right or wrong here. You know, Oliver and I are
It's got to be 10 or 15 years ago, there was a whole back and forth on Snapchat Mafia with you.
Snapchat?
Snapchat Mafia.
Oh, yeah, people didn't like me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I did my best. If I put somebody's picture in a show that a collector owned, I did my best to find them. But people don't realize that when you put something on the internet, you lose control over it. It doesn't maintain your name attached to it.
Unless you watermark it.
Well, nobody wants to watermark it.
I always do.
And anyway, I think it speaks to a moment in time. Things are different. I've certainly, I think I had like a overly academic approach to it and not a human approach. You know, I recognize there is like a real, I've always held that curators and collectors are artists. You know, I think that there's a real art to collecting, especially stuff like this where it's not investment, speculative collecting. So I definitely recognize a person wanting to have their name attached to the picture. But I also sort of feel like one of the beauties of it all is that you didn't take the picture.
You know, I had a show in Brooklyn about 3 years ago of different photo booth pictures that I had, and tintypes, and they were enlarged. And I had one of this kid that was from San Francisco. He was about 12 or 14 with a traditional Chinese outfit with a long, long braid. And there was a woman, Asian, who came and she looked at the photo and she started sobbing. And then she had her husband come and take photos of her hugging the picture. And I was in tears. I mean, I didn't approach him. I didn't say anything. It was a very private thing, and I didn't want to intrude on them. But this image was so meaningful to her. I mean, she was sobbing and getting pictures of her with the photo. And I live for stuff like that. You know, this woman, it was so joyful for her. I was so deeply moved by it. And that's what photography is for, is touching people, getting reactions, getting people involved, getting people to really look. Because everything in our lives are in transition. And for people to look at photos, I mean, it's a very special thing.
Well, I came back early today, because I want to say it, because I found these to be so moving. I really wanted to look at them carefully and slowly, because each one is so profound. They're just.
I feel the same way. I mean, when I came here today and I'm looking at the photos again, I'm going, it's like every time I look at them, it's like the first time.
But that's, I want to let you know a little secret. They're all made in AI. None of these are real.
So
Bring it back.
So
That's not true.
What a wonderful conversation.
Great. I'm glad I came.
Time to make some closing announcements.
Hi, everyone. I'm just going to say thank you so much for coming. If you're not already a member, that would mean you missed our members' email this week, which went out with all of our summer workshops. It's a very exciting reason to become a member, is you get a week notice. Also, you get to be part of this community. We have Digital Lab. We have a big new building on the horizon that will have lots of really fun things like bigger exhibitions and talks and photo booth. Näkki's original wet process automat will be in our building. and her payment is she gets a copy of every one. One goes to Näkki and one goes to you. How do you like that? Anyway, thanks for everyone for coming. Next week we have Jasmine Clark, who is the fellow at Bard right now. So that should be a really interesting conversation. And there's just more every week. So thank you for coming. And thank you to Oliver and Näkki so much.